Just saying.
Just saying. But I got a story up. I got a story. Anybody got? If anybody else doesn't.
I do not.
Okay. Okay. So on the same theme of murderous police.
Mm.
Um, so the Guardian is reporting that the officer acquitted of Elijah
Wow.
McClain's death got their job back and a 200,000 in back pay. So Nathan Woodyard was suspended for 2 years until a jury found him not guilty of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. It said the Colorado officer who stopped Elijah McClain in 2019 and placed him in a neck hold was reinstated to the Aurora Police Department and will receive $200,000 in back pay. City officials said Monday. Woodyard's reintegration into the police force comes weeks after a jury found him not guilty of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. Woodyard had been suspended without pay for 2 years since he was indicted for his role in the death of the 23-year-old. An Aurora spokesperson said the city law mandated that the department offer him his job back after his acquittal in the criminal trial and that he would receive $212,546 to cover the salary from his leave. They termed it a leave. The killing of McClain, who became unconscious as he was held down by multiple officers and then was injected with a dangerously high dose of ketamine, sparked national outrage and years of protest. McClain was a massage therapist and animal lover who had taught himself to play the violin. They said Woodward, one of 3 officers who have faced prosecution, is returning to his job despite playing a pivotal role in the initial stop of McClain and using force tactics that the local coroner's office has ruled contributed to his death. So I guess we can stop. It was just really quickly. It says the beginning of the stories in August 2019, McClain was walking home from buying iced tea at a convenience store and listening to music on his headphones when a driver passing by called police reporting that McClain looked sketchy. It might be a good person or a bad person. McClain was wearing a ski mask, which he used to keep him warm due to being anemic. Although the 9/11 caller made clear that he did not see any weapons and that he was not in danger, nor was anyone else. Police quickly responded with extreme force. Woodyard was the first to confront McClain. Body camera footage showed immediately grabbing him and shouting, "I have a right to stop you because you're being suspicious." 2 other police officers soon arrived with Woodyard surrounded him. McClain responded, "I'm an introvert. Please respect the boundaries that I'm speaking. I'm going home." And then they forced him down and put him in a chokehold. So the officer who did all of that is receiving over 200,000 in back pay, reinstated to the force. Similarly, here in Atlanta, the officer who had killed Rashard Brooks also was reinstated, and today is an officer in the Atlanta Police Department. And as we all know, this happens in many ways, in many forms, where officers, even if they don't go back to the force that they were originally with, other police departments quickly offer them jobs as they being their comrades. They offer them jobs in sheriff departments, or the sheriff departments have lesser standards because the sheriff themselves are elected. And so they have lesser standards than city-run agencies. And they quickly offer these people salaried jobs and employment to support them and show support for their fellow so-called actors in blue. So remember, this happens in many ways across the country when officers who are accused and who are even caught on videotape are known to have committed a sort of a heinous act and killed people, particularly Black people, are offered their jobs back. And in this particular case, offered their job back and $200,000 in pay.
Yeah, Tamar Rice too, right?
Yes, Tamir.
Tamir.
But the same thing, though. I mean, with Tamir Rice, John Crawford Jr. or John Crawford II, also a young person who was murdered in Ohio. This was all based off the words of 911 callers, right? Tamir Rice wasn't doing anything illegal or criminal, nor was John Crawford, nor was Elijah McClain, but just a simple call to police about a Black person looking quote, sketchy, suspicious, you might as well be calling the execution squad to come murder them, right? And I know we have some white viewers. I know we got probably some respectable black viewers. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all, don't call the fucking police, okay? And tell the others, like, just because somebody's in your neighborhood or walking, or just because somebody looks in a way that you may not be comfortable with or whatever, does not mean that they're doing anything that deserves a police response. Like whatever the fuck they're doing, it does not deserve a police encounter, right? And I think people are just so quick to call 911. Like, it's white folks customer service, as I've heard it described, right? Hello, there's a black in my neighborhood acting in a way that I don't agree. Knock it the fuck off. Like, people's lives are literally in danger. And when we're talking about the amount of response, police response, versus what precipitated the fucking call in the first place, it's nothing. And yet these people are gone. They are dead. And for what?
Yeah. I also think, though, that's a conversation that's very hard to have in our neighborhoods, especially with elders in the community, because it's not really so much respectability that they're coming from. They're more vulnerable, and they understand themselves to be more vulnerable, in terms of,
no. If you in
well,
the
I'm talking
house,
about in terms of how they understand safety and keeping themselves safe, right? So their trigger reaction, especially when you've been condoned, like you've been sort of told, like when something goes wrong, you call 911. They don't know of an alternative, right? So it is a trigger reaction for them, even if they feel like, so we could say that people should know better, but when it, the way I understand it, especially in speaking with them and watching them unpack it in real time, like, oh, wait, the police do, like, they understand that the police do bad things, but they also understand in terms of safety that there's no alternative, right? So if they are feeling that they are not safe, it is a trigger response to call who you are told to keep you safe. Now, to what extent they understand that the police do not keep us safe, that's a conversation that, us organizers, we fill in those gaps. But having conversations with elderly people in these neighborhoods that would call the police, this is what they tell you. And for the most part, not every one of them is conservative, and not every one of them look at children a particular way, but they do understand their circumstances as being more vulnerable, as needing more protection, and what does that look like. So, I mean, it's a battle, really, and it's always been that sort of struggle, especially in terms of, like, helping people in the community understand that we do not need policing, right? Because the first question is, okay, so then what? We don't have police, but then what do we have? And I think without having that alternative, or this is always going to be a thing, whether it's like because I don't necessarily think it's something that just white people are doing, and I don't think it's something that black people are doing consciously, like,
they
knowing that
aren't,
this will
because
be the end.
we've seen it a lot when people experiencing a mental health crisis. Their own family members will call the police
Right,
on them, right?
right,
And what happens? Bad shit usually happens. And you're right.
right,
No, people need to be conditioned out of that, because, again, it really doesn't even matter the reason that you're summoning police to your home. Like, it could easily turn into a life or death situation immediately. Like, I
right,
had to learn that the hard way at my own house. You know what I'm saying? I
right.
had 5 PG County police pointing guns at me and threatening to shoot my dog. I called them motherfuckers. You understand? Like, that shit, lesson learned. You know what I'm saying? I would never do that goofy shit ever again in my life. But just so people could be aware, like, especially in these mental health crisis situations, where we see their own family members call the police, and the police come and murder them in front of their own people. We have to break our folks out of this. But in these cases, I am very certain. I can't say for 100% certain, but I'm certain it had to have been a white person calling the police on Elijah McClain. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't see a black person randomly seeing another black person walking down the street wearing a mask in Denver in March and be like, "Oh, that person looks sketchy." And that was whites all day. That had the white folks written over it all day. So did Tamir Rice, and so did John Crawford. I think those were also white callers when you listen to
Yeah.
the 911 calls. But that's the something we need white people to understand. Well, we need black people to understand too, but white people really need to understand it. Like, unless you want this black person to literally die in front of you, think twice before you summon the police to your location.
Well, and most likely they do.
Damn.
Which is why, well, you're right, because they have a different understanding. The police protect and serve them for the most part. Like, that's their understanding. I just seen a clip, I think, from Harriet's Dreams. They were in Georgetown. They were like, standing on the corner with signs about Palestine. And it was this one Zionist Jewish woman that was just standing on the corner just spewing nastiness at them relentlessly, relentlessly, relentlessly. And they're just holding signs. They're not even reacting to her, not even saying anything to her. So then she's pushes past them to go into the store after she's, getting more agitated because she's working herself up. Telling that, to eventually saying they should be raped and they should burn in ovens, the nastiness. And then she walks in, she was like, you know what? I should call the police on you. And she's harassing them. So, so they have that understanding, like that is what the police are for, right? But for me, I think it gets tricky when we speak to our own because they don't use the police in that way. Like, oh, I'm gonna get the police on your ass. Like, no, it's more so like I need the police because I have a particular understanding of safety. Now, there are examples of like, upper bougie upper class, and there are examples of people who do tactically use the system as a means to get revenge on people. And that's not to say that doesn't happen, but I think the overall account of policing, especially within our communities, and trying to get people to understand the role that police serve and what we need to do to break away from that, it becomes trickier when you're speaking to a certain demographic of our community that they've been through the civil rights, they understand all of that, and still will call 911 if they feel that they are not safe.
In our organization, we have a Black Karen in the community who can every time we do garden events, and she calls the police. Like she's become a Trumper, a right-wing Trumper, and she calls the police when we do garden events. She calls the police constantly to try to break up our activities and organizing because she's opposed. She once supported, but then she's she's a little tay-tay. And but so she supports the calling of the police on us for that type of purpose. But I agree, like it, people have to understand, like these cops, whatever so-called training they get, these are people who are hyped up to be having power and control at this sort of face-to-face level, and looking for ways to exercise it. And to Kim's story, I mean, it's I don't want to be like just a lot of not people who are too smart. I'm trying to be careful with the words. Just not a lot of smart people who are cops who their sense of power in their life is being able to tell somebody else to stop, to halt, to put their hands on somebody, to give out advice, to chastise, all of that stuff. They get to get it all out because they got the badge and the gun, right? And there's just too much of that in terms of how policing is done, and the fact that you give somebody that kind of power, and then the oversight of that power is such that in the end they wind up getting jobs back after killing people at 200,000. So you're not encouraging people not to act that way when they have that kind of street level power. What you're actually doing, of course, is sanctioning it and saying like, hey, we have a system built that you can create the worst offense ever in terms of snuffing out the life of somebody who's done no harm. And the reply and return to that down the line will be back pay and job back that you had when you did it in the first place.